Hey, I answered, immediately distracted by the sound of his voice. Shouldn't you be in your morning meeting? Jake. Something in his tone made me sit up straighter. Can you meet me for lunch? There's something I need to tell you. Is everything okay? A pause that lasted too long. We just need to talk. I spent the next 3 hours in a state of low-level panic, running through every possible scenario. By the time I met him at our usual cafe, I'd convinced myself that he was about to end things between us. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at the same table where we'd had our second meeting. But everything about his posture was different, closed off, defensive. The easy warmth that usually lit up his face when he saw me was nowhere to be found. What's going on? I asked, sliding into the chair across from him. David called me last night, he said without preamble. The engagement is off. My stomach dropped. Oh. He wants to try again. Says he realizes now that what we had was real, that he made a mistake. Theo's hands were wrapped around his coffee cup like he was trying to draw warmth from it. He's been thinking about us since he got engaged. About what we could have been. I stared at him, trying to read his expression, trying to understand what this meant for us. And I don't know what to do. He finally looked at me and I could see the confusion and pain there. Jake, I was with him for 2 years. We had a life together, plans. And the way it ended, there was so much left unsaid. Are you asking for my permission to go back to him? The words came out harsher than I intended. No. I'm asking you to help me figure out what I want. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I can't do that for you, Theo. That's not fair. I know it's not fair. But I'm so confused right now, and you're the only person who what? Who cares enough about you to tell you to choose someone else? He flinched. That's not what I meant. But it was exactly what he meant and we both knew it. I could see it in the way he couldn't quite meet my eyes, in the careful distance he was maintaining across the small table. How long have you been thinking about this? I asked. Since he called. Since last night. And before that? Have you been thinking about him since we started? Whatever this is. Jake. It's a simple question. He was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes. Not the way you think, but, yes. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if we tried harder. I nodded, feeling something break open in my chest. Okay. I think you should go. I stood up, pulling money from my wallet for coffee I hadn't touched. Not leave Chicago, I mean go to him. Figure out what you need to figure out. Jake, wait. No, Theo. You're right that there are things you need to resolve. But I can't be part of that process. I won't be the person you're comparing him to, or the safe choice you fall back on if it doesn't work out. I was walking away before he could respond, my hands shaking as I pushed through the cafe door. Behind me I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't turn around. That night I called Marcus and got spectacularly drunk. I told him everything, about the past month with Theo, about David's reappearance, about the look in Theo's eyes when he'd said he was confused. He's an idiot, Marcus said, refilling my glass. You two were perfect together. No, we weren't. I stared into the wine, seeing my distorted reflection there. Perfect was that first night in the bar. Everything since then has been real life, and real life is complicated. So what are you going to do? Nothing. If he chooses David, then I'll know it was never really about me. And if he doesn't? I shrugged. I guess we'll see. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't that simple. Whatever Theo decided, something between us had shifted. The easy trust, the sense of inevitability that had carried us through the past month, that was gone now, replaced by the knowledge that what we had wasn't strong enough to survive the first real test. I spent the next few days in a kind of suspended animation, going through the motions of work and normal life while part of me waited for a call or text that never came. By Friday, I'd accepted that whatever we'd had was over, regardless of what Theo decided about David. Some things, once broken, can't be put back together the same way. A week passed without a word from Theo. Then 2 weeks. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office until the building was empty and the streets outside were quiet. Anything to avoid going home to an apartment that felt too empty, too full of memories of conversations that had happened mostly in my head. Marcus tried to get me to go out, to meet other people, but I wasn't ready. Every time I considered downloading a dating app or saying yes to one of the setups he kept suggesting, I thought about Theo's laugh, or the way he'd looked at me on that roof deck, Or the morning he brought me coffee without being asked because he'd learned exactly how I liked it. "You're in love with him," Marcus said one Thursday night as we sat in my living room, ostensibly watching a movie but really just drinking beer and avoiding conversation. "What? You're in love with him? That's why you can't move on." I wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in my throat. Was I in love with Theo? I'd been so careful not to let myself think the word, even in the privacy of my own head. Love was dangerous. Love was the thing that made you vulnerable, that let someone else have the power to destroy you. But sitting there in my dark apartment, I had to admit that Marcus was right. Somewhere between that first night in the bar and the moment he told me about David's phone call, I'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with Theo Martinez. "Damn," I said quietly. "Yeah, damn." Marcus muted the TV. "So what are you going to do about it?" "Nothing. He made his choice." "Did he? Or did you make it for him by walking away?" I stared at my friend, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means maybe he was looking for you to fight for him, and instead you told him to go figure things out with his ex." He needed to figure things out. I wasn't going to be the person standing in the way of that. Or maybe you were scared that if you fought for him, you might lose anyway, so you decided to lose on your own terms. The accuracy of the observation hit me like a physical blow. I thought about that afternoon in the cafe, about the careful distance I'd maintained, the way I'd walked away before he could say anything else. Had I been protecting myself or protecting him? "It doesn't matter now," I said. "It's been 2 weeks. If he wanted to talk to me, he would have called. Maybe he's waiting for you to call him." "Why would he be waiting for me?" "Because you're the one who left Jake. You're the one who said he should go figure things out. Maybe he did, and now he's waiting to see if you still want to know what he figured out." I spent the weekend thinking about Marcus's words, replaying every conversation Theo and I had ever had, looking for clues I might have missed. By Sunday night, I'd convinced myself to call him, but when I picked up my phone, I realized I didn't know what to say. "Hey, I know I told you to go resolve things with your ex, but I'm in love with you and I was wondering how that went. Hi, it's been 2 weeks and I miss you so much I can barely breathe. Want to get coffee? I think I made a mistake and I don't know how to fix it." None of it sounded right. All of it sounded desperate. On Monday morning, I was walking to work when I saw him. He was coming out of the coffee shop we'd been to on our second date, and for a moment, we just stared at each other across the busy sidewalk. He looked different, thinner maybe, and there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when he saw me, his face lit up with something that looked almost like relief. We approached each other slowly, like we were both afraid the other might bolt. "Hi," he said when we were close enough to speak without shouting over the traffic. "Hi. How are you?" "Terrible," I said because I was too tired to lie. "You?" "Terrible." We stood there for a moment, neither of us knowing what to say next. People flowed around us on the sidewalk, going about their normal Monday morning lives, while we remained frozen in this bubble of awkwardness and unfinished business. "Jake," he said finally. "Can we talk? I mean really talk this time?" I looked at him, at the uncertainty in his eyes, at the way he was holding himself like he was prepared for me to say no, and felt something shift inside my chest. "Yeah," I said. "We can talk." We ended up back at his apartment because it was closer and because neither of us seemed capable of having this conversation in public. The familiar space felt different now, charged with everything we hadn't said, everything that had changed since the last time I'd been there. He made coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, and I sat on the couch where we talked until 2 in the morning that first night, trying not to think about how much I'd missed this place, this person. "I need to tell you what happened," he said, settling beside me with careful distance between us. "With David." My stomach clenched, but I nodded. "Okay. I went to see him the day after we talked. After you left the cafe." He stared into his coffee cup. "I needed to know if what I was feeling for you was real, or if I was just running from something unfinished. And I spent 3 hours with him. We talked about everything, why we broke up, what went wrong, whether we could fix it." He looked up at me. "And you know what I realized?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. I realized that I'd been romanticizing what we had because it was safe. Because missing someone who's gone is easier than risking your heart on someone who's right in front of you. Something loosened in my chest, but I tried not to let hope take root too quickly. "What does that mean?" "It means that sitting there with David, all I could think about was you. About how you laugh when you think something is genuinely funny versus when you're just being polite. About the way you listen when I talk like what I'm saying actually matters. About how being with you feels like coming home to a place I didn't even know I was looking for. The hope was growing now, spreading through my chest like warmth. But I needed to hear the rest. I told him I couldn't try again, Theo continued. That I was in love with someone else. You told him you were in love with me? I told him I was in love with you. Past tense because I thought I'd fucked it up beyond repair. He set down his coffee and turned to face me fully. Jake, I'm so sorry. I should never have put you in that position. I should never have made you feel like you were competing with someone from my past. I understand why you needed to figure it out, I said quietly. I just couldn't be part of the process. I know. And I don't blame you for walking away. But I need you to know that it was never really a choice. Not once I met you. I was just too scared to admit it even to myself. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes, the vulnerability he was offering me. Why didn't you call me after you talked to David? Because I was afraid you'd decided you were done with me. Because I was afraid I'd hurt you too badly to fix it. He reached for my hand, hesitating until I let him take it. And because Marcus told me you needed time. Marcus? My Marcus. He called me last week. Told me you were miserable but too stubborn to make the first move. Told me to give you a little more time to figure out what you wanted. I was going to kill Marcus. But also, I was going to buy him the most expensive bottle of whiskey I could afford. What do I want? I asked. I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. His thumb traced across my knuckles. I know what I want. What do you want? You. This. Us. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my palm. I want to try again if you'll let me. I want to do this right this time. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes and I didn't try to hide them. I was so scared, I whispered. When you said you were confused, I thought I was just a rebound. Someone to help you get over him. Never. His voice was fierce. Jake, you were never a rebound. You were the person who made me realize what I'd been missing my whole life. I love you, I said because I couldn't hold it back anymore. I've been in love with you since that second night at the cafe, maybe since that first night in the bar. I was just too scared to say it. His smile was radiant, transforming his whole face. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. Good terrified or bad terrified? The best kind of terrified. He leaned closer until our foreheads were touching. The kind that means it matters. When he kissed me, it was different from all the kisses that had come before. It was an apology and a promise, a question and an answer all at once. It was the kiss of two people who had found their way back to each other through the maze of their own fears. I missed you, I murmured against his lips. I missed you too. Every day. We spent the rest of the morning on his couch, talking through everything that had happened, everything we'd felt but hadn't said. He told me about the sleepless nights, about how he'd walked past my apartment building twice, hoping to catch a glimpse of me. I told him about the work I'd buried myself in, about the way I'd avoided our usual places because everything reminded me of him. We're going to be okay, he said as afternoon light started filtering through his windows. Aren't we? Better than okay, I said and meant it. Because this time, we weren't strangers meeting in a dark bar or two people getting to know each other over coffee. We were two people who had chosen each other, who had looked at their fears and their pasts and decided that what they had together was worth fighting for. So what happens now? He asked. Now we try again, I said. But this time we do it with everything on the table. No more mysterious strangers, no more careful distance. Just us figuring it out together. I can live with that, he said and kissed me again. 6 months later, I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror in Theo's apartment. Our apartment now, getting ready for Marcus's wedding. My Marcus, not the one from Theo's office, who had somehow managed to find love with a kindergarten teacher named David of all names, which we'd all agreed was cosmically ridiculous. You're going to be late, Theo called from the bedroom, but there was amusement in his voice. I'm not going to be late. I'm being thorough. You've been being thorough for 20 minutes. It's a bow tie, not rocket science. I emerged from the bathroom to find him sitting on the bed, fully dressed in his tuxedo and looking unfairly handsome. He'd been ready for an hour because he was one of those people who could put on formal wear and look like he'd stepped out of a magazine, while I fought with every piece of clothing like it was personally offending me. "Come here," he said, patting the bed beside him. I sat down, and he reached over to adjust my bow tie with the kind of easy intimacy that still made my heart skip sometimes. 6 months of living together, and I still wasn't used to how natural this felt, how right. "Better?" I asked. "Perfect." He leaned in to kiss me, then pulled back with a grin. "Though I have to say, I'm looking forward to getting you out of this tux later." Promises, promises. We'd moved in together 3 months ago, after a conversation that had started with, "My lease is up," and ended with, "Why don't we just find a place together?" It had been surprisingly easy, the kind of easy that made both of us suspicious at first. But the truth was, we'd already been spending most nights together anyway, and combining our lives had felt less like a big step and more like finally admitting what was already true. The wedding was beautiful. Marcus crying as David walked down the aisle, vows that made half the guests weep, dancing that went on until the early hours of the morning. Theo and I had claimed a corner table and spent most of the reception holding hands and making fun of my terrible dancing. "You know," he said as we swayed to some slow song I didn't recognize, "I never thanked Marcus properly." "For what?" "For calling me that night. For telling me to give you time, but also for letting me know you were as miserable as I was." I laughed. "He's still taking credit for getting us back together." "He should. We were both too stubborn to make the first move." "Were we?" "Oh, definitely. We would have spent months circling each other like wounded animals if he hadn't intervened." I considered this as we danced, remembering those awful 2 weeks when I'd been too proud and too scared to reach out. "Do you think we would have found our way back to each other eventually?" "I like to think so. But I'm glad we didn't have to find out." Later, as we walked home through the quiet streets, still in our tuxedos but with bow ties loosened and jackets slung over our shoulders, I found myself thinking about that first night in the bar. How Theo had been a beautiful stranger, someone I'd never expected to see again. How he'd walked away into the night, leaving me with the taste of possibility and the certainty that some moments were meant to stay perfect and untouchable. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing my silence. "That first night. When you said maybe it was better to leave it perfect and untouched." "I was an idiot." "No, you weren't. You were scared. We both were." He stopped walking and turned to face me under a streetlight. "And now? Now I think perfect is overrated. I'd rather have real. Even with all the messy, complicated parts? Especially with all the messy, complicated parts." When we got home, we didn't rush to tear each other's clothes off the way we might have in the early days. Instead, we helped each other out of our formal wear with the kind of reverence usually reserved for unwrapping something precious. We brushed our teeth side by side, and I watched him in the mirror as he went through his nighttime routine, still amazed that this was my life now. In bed, we made love with the slow, thorough attention of two people who knew they had all the time in the world. There was no desperation, no fear that this might be the last time. Just the quiet certainty of bodies that knew each other, hearts that had chosen each other, minds that had finally stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Afterward, we lay tangled together in the dark, Theo's head on my chest, my fingers running through his hair. "Jake. I love this life we've built." "Me too. I love waking up next to you and fighting over who's going to make coffee, and the way you steal my hoodies." "I don't steal them. I borrow them indefinitely." He laughed, the sound vibrating against my chest. "I love that you're the last person I talk to before I fall asleep and the first person I see when I wake up." "Theo?" "Yeah. Are you about to propose to me?" He lifted his head to look at me, and even in the darkness I could see he was smiling. "Not tonight. But ask me again in a few months." "Is that a promise?" "That's a promise." I pulled him up for a kiss, tasting the future on his lips. Outside, Chicago hummed with its endless energy, but inside our apartment, our bed, our life together, everything was exactly as it should be. We'd started as strangers in a bar, two people looking for something we couldn't name. Now we were home, and we were whole, and we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Some love stories begin with a meet cute. Some begin with love at first sight. Ours began with a beautiful mistake that turned out to be the most right thing either of us had ever done. And as I drifted off to sleep with Theo warm and solid beside me, I knew that whatever came next, proposals and weddings and mortgages and fights and making up and growing old together, we would face it the way we'd learned to face everything. Together, completely, without reservation. Perfect, it turned out, was just another word for real.
you.